president of City Club. For 100 years, City Club of Portland is where civic-minded people come together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and explore. We're gathered at the Sentinel Hotel, along with all of you listening on OPB Radio or viewing on Portland Community Media or YouTube. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners enables us to put on the state's best civic programs week after week. Our media partner is Oregon Business Magazine, and our current Friday Forum sponsors are Chevron Corporation, Echo Northwest, Morel Inc., Northwest Natural, and Vacasa Vacation Rentals. Please join me in showing our appreciation for our sponsors. Today, we are joined by United States Senator Jeff Merkley, who will speak to both his successes and challenges in working to advance equity and opportunity for all Oregonians. Senator Merkley has been representing Oregon in the Senate since 2009. He serves on the critically important Senate Appropriations Committee, along with committees ranging from banking to housing to the environment and public works. Prior to the Senate, he served as a Speaker of the House here in Oregon. He's a lifelong Oregonian and was also formerly the president of the World Affairs Council of Oregon. Throughout his career, our senator has focused on serving working families in Oregon and across the country. Our moderator, Nichole Maher, is president and CEO of Northwest Health Foundation. Before joining Northwest Health Foundation as president and CEO in 2012, Nichole served as executive director at the Native American Youth and Family Center and has spent most of her career working for healthy, thriving youth and families. In addition to serving on City Club of Portland's Board of Governors, Nichole has served on the governing boards of the National Urban Indian Family Coalition, the Oregon Historical Society, Levy Oversight Committee, and the Oregon Education Investment Board, among many others. Please join me in welcoming Nichole, and our senator will make some brief remarks.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back here with you today, and particularly to say a few comments about the challenges we face in civil justice and equality. Few concepts are fundamentally more American than the concept of equality. It's a principle our nation was founded on. It was embedded in our Constitution. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For more than 2 centuries, we've worked hard as a nation to bring our laws and our actions ever closer to living up to these founding ideals. As Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Well, here in America, we've been working to bend towards justice, to end slavery, to extend the right of vote to women, to pass the Civil Rights Act to end discrimination based on gender and ethnicity and race, to pass the Voting Rights Act to enable every American citizen to participate fully in the elections that drive the direction of our nation. We've worked to improve the nation's economic scales, to put the American dream within reach of all, and we've made great strides for the LGBTQ community in recent years. But no matter how far we have come, events around the nation remind us of how far we still have to go. Growing camps of the homeless here in the city of Portland and here throughout our state remind us about how our economy is dramatically failing far too many Americans. The violent assault on the Pulse nightclub reminds us that prejudice and hate against the LGBT community are still embedded in the hearts of far too many. Mass incarceration, the profiling of minorities, the shooting of black men by public safety officers reveal deep injustice in our justice system, challenges we've yet to remedy. And the random violence against police officers, when the vast majority of our police officers risk their lives every day for our safety, is yet another form of great injustice. Martin Luther King reminded us, returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. That's why we need to take on this challenge. How about that the next legislature that convenes in January proceed quickly to pass the Camera Act, to pass the End Racial Profiling Act, and to pass the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act. Far too many low-income and minority Americans don't have equal access to the kinds of services, the quality of education, the health care, the financial resources that better-off families have, and which are necessary to get ahead in life. The inequality is one of the leading reasons why minority families still lag behind white families in employment, in home ownership, and in economic stability. But we also see that inequality manifests itself in other parts of society. We see it as the rich are getting richer, the poor get poorer. Over the last 4 decades, virtually 100% of the new income in America went to the top 10%, leaving 9 out of 10 Americans out in the cold. Or here's another way to look at it. The top 0.1% in America own as much as the bottom 90%. We see it as low-income and minority communities are targeted by predatory financial practices like payday loans and title loans. Here in Oregon, we acted to eliminate the high-interest payday loans and title loans, but in many states there's been no action, and even in states that have, like Oregon, we see a rampant internet business in promoting these 500, 600, 700% loans. We need a national act and national action by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to end predatory lending across our nation. We've seen incredible changes in the civil rights for our LGBTQ community, and that includes the right to marry anywhere in America now. But you can be married in the morning, and you can be fired from your job in the afternoon. You can be evicted from your apartment in far too many states. You can be banned from restaurants and theaters. You can actually be banned from jury duty and from mortgages. All of this has to change. That's why the next Congress should move expediently to pass the Equality Act, which puts an end to discrimination, just as we did by anchoring it in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But one of the most crippling aspects of what is happening in our nation is the perversion of our we the people vision embedded in our Constitution to one of we the powerful and we the privileged. And this is the result of the flow of money that comes from Buckley versus Vallejo and from Citizens United. It's corrupted our campaign finance system. It enabled the very few to buy the equivalent of a stadium sound system that drowns out the voice of ordinary people. That is not the vision that was embedded in our Constitution when Jefferson talked about the mother principle. That is, we could only be a republic, claim to be one, to the degree that our decisions reflect the will of the people, and that would only be the case if the people, each member, has an equal voice, is a term he put it. Well, what Citizens United does, Buckley versus Vallejo does, is give an unequal voice. Let's complete the 9-member panel of the Supreme Court and have a panel that believes in we the people and reverses Citizens United. Our commitment, our journey towards the vision of equity and fairness, opportunity for all, is a foundation of our national vision and a foundation of our success. It makes us strong. It's who we are. We should never stop striving towards that goal, that all are created equal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. And as a reminder for those of you listening to us on OPB, you are listening to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Nichole Maher from Northwest Health Foundation, and I am joined by the Honorable Senator Jeff Merkley speaking to us about how to advance equity and opportunity for all Oregonians. Welcome to the City Club.
Thank you so much, Nichole. Great to be with you.
So today we're just going to talk through a few questions and go a little bit deeper on what you shared in your remarks and perhaps get to some topics that you didn't have a chance to cover. So the first question I wanted to ask is about a topic that I know you're incredibly passionate about, and it's about energy and clean energy. I saw that you recently outlined a plan to transition the United States to 100% clean energy by 2050. That's very exciting and it's very ambitious. Will you share a little bit more detail about that plan and also how people in Portland and people in Oregon can play a role?
You bet, Nichole. And this is a challenge that all of us here in Oregon are aware of. We can look at it to understand it from 2 points of view. First, the facts on the ground. What we see is a forest fire season that has grown by 2 months over the last 4 decades here in our state. We see our oyster industry over on the coast having trouble with the baby oysters forming shells because the ocean is now 30% more acidic than before we started burning carbon dioxide. We see it in the snowpack in the Cascades and its impact on drought in the Klamath Basin. We see it wherever we look, and that's true across the nation. You can look to the moose in Minnesota or New Hampshire that are dying because the winter's not cold enough to kill the ticks that prey on them and spread disease. You can see it in the lobsters off Maine migrating north, and Maine's afraid it's going to lose its lobsters to Canada. You see it place after place after place. In addition, you can see it simply by the measurements we take of the world's heat. And 2014 was the warmest year on record through the time of recording until 2015. And 2015 was the warmest year on record. And now for 14 consecutive months, each month has been the warmest month in history. That is January of this year, the warmest of all the Januaries ever recorded, and February the same, and March the same. And I just checked on June, and it's the same as well. So whether you look at the facts on the ground or you look at the international record, we see a progression of heating that is extraordinarily fast and scary. The scientists tell us that we have to hold the increase in heat to 2 degrees to avoid catastrophic change. Now, we've already seen plenty of impact, but those impacts will multiply. We're already halfway towards that 2-degree change that they've set as a boundary that we should work to avoid. So that comes to your question. Then, in order for us to solve this, to address this, we have to be aggressive about it in a way we've never imagined, and we're running behind the clock. And so I introduced a few months ago the Keep It in the Ground bill, which was, my colleagues said, what are you thinking when I first proposed it? And now, a few months later, a number have signed on, and many others have said, yes, we need to do it. We own, as citizens, a tremendous amount of fossil fuels. You and I, we are all gas barons and coal barons and oil barons. In fact, if we were to leave in the ground all that we own as citizens, it would be 8 to 10% of what the entire planet needs to leave in the ground to avoid catastrophe. So that's why Keep in the Ground says no more leases of our citizen-owned fossil fuels. The best way to serve the planet is keep it in the ground. But that's only part of the formulation. That leads me to the second bill that I announced I'll be introducing in the fall. It'll be a roadmap to get to that vision of 100% renewable energy by 2050. So that gives us 35 years, and we are racing the clock. And it means in the generation of electricity and in transportation, we need to do a tremendous number of things to stop burning carbon fuels, fossil fuels. And so I'll just stop there and say, people say, well, how will it possibly happen? Well, let's lay out a roadmap and then work to improve that roadmap and then work to pass legislation that will get us there. And by the way, reversing Citizens United will be essential to implementing such a roadmap because right now the Koch brothers and the oil and coal billionaires are a big impediment to doing what we need to do to save our planet.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch gears really quickly, and I want to talk about housing. Housing has really reached epic proportions in Oregon as far as a crisis, and really across the nation. And impacting low-income people, single mothers, people with lived experience with disabilities, and seniors. Now, we really look at housing often from a local perspective, but the reality is that the largest share of resources for housing actually comes from the federal government. And the largest subsidy that we provide in this country is actually the mortgage interest tax deduction. And that tax deduction mostly impacts upper income and middle class people. And I have sort of two questions. One, share with us what you think the solutions are from a federal perspective on how to address this housing affordability crisis. And then talk to us a little bit about your perspective on the mortgage interest tax deduction.
Okay, so you're certainly right to flag this as a major challenge. The Portland area is one of the hot spots in the nation that's seen the impact higher than other places. U-Haul reports that its one-way trailers show that people are moving to the Portland metro area more than anywhere else in the country, and our vacancy rate is now about 1%. 1 out of 100 apartments is actually open, which is incredibly low, and it means as a family of modest means you try to rent that apartment, but the price has gone up, the rents have gone up. And one of the ways this has affected our ability to address the problem is it undermines the strategy behind the Section 8 certificates. So if you can be on a waiting list to get a Section 8 certificate, which helps pay your rent, you pay 30% of what you earn, the government pays the rest, and you're all excited and you go out and you find that the only apartment available costs more than that certificate will cover. And so one of the things I'm pushing for is in areas where the rents are going up rapidly, is to have a rapid response evaluation of what the rental market is so that those certificates will cover a greater amount, because right now that's not working. In addition, we need to have a lot more funding to build apartments that are permanently secured for families of modest income, 80% of median income, 50% of median income. And that means an expansion either of a direct grant system or of the low-income housing tax credit system that's in place now. There are other pieces to this puzzle. We have to think out of the box about the type of housing we construct. And just to throw out one thought on this, we have systematically eliminated single-room occupancies, SROs. I lived in a single-room occupancy in New York City and lived on an intern salary. I couldn't have afforded to live anywhere else in that city. And I had a wonderful clean room and a bathroom down the hall. But we've kind of embedded in our mind 3-bedroom ranch houses as the standard. Well, we need to find other strategies. Maybe it's small houses, maybe it's SROs, maybe it's other systems that encourage people to rent out their rooms as their children have left to share with others who need places to live. Kind of an expansion on the Airbnb concept. But we have to be willing to ask ourselves, are there different ways we can approach this challenge? And now turning to the home mortgage interest deduction. Back when I was director of Habitat Humanity, I used to give little speeches where I'd lay out the size of that subsidy that went to upper income Americans and argue that over time we should reduce that because it's very generous, and the richer you are and the bigger house you buy, the more you get out of it. But quite frankly, it's a very difficult strategy politically. We're deeply embedded with the current strategy. I don't want our effort to address the challenge of affordable housing, a decent place and a decent community for every family, to get defeated because we take on a funding mechanism that may lead to that defeat. So it is important for us all to remember, because sometimes I hear people talking about, well, the poor are helped in this way and they're helped in that way. But middle and upper class families get a huge amount of benefit from the federal government embedded in the tax code, and that's certainly one big piece of it. So maybe that should make us all think generously about how we assist those who are struggling.
Thank you for that. So in preparing these questions, myself and City Club worked very hard to engage and ask lots of Oregonians what they might like to hear from you. And one of the themes that came up over and over again was that a lot of Oregonians are actually pretty skeptical that Congress is capable of accomplishing anything of substance right now during this time and in this particular climate. Do you think that skepticism is warranted? And if so, what needs to happen to get Congress back on track where it's passing meaningful policy addressing the needs of everyday Oregonians?
Well, to whether skepticism is warranted, I think everyone in this room is thinking the same thing, which is absolutely yes. What we've seen is just now, Congress has gone on in-state work periods or recess, and that's done because the majority leader wanted to send folks home to campaign. But I should be in D.C. right now. We haven't addressed the opiate problem. We haven't addressed the lead in Flint and lead in systems all across this country. We haven't passed a bill to rebuild our infrastructure in America, to put people to work and prepare the infrastructure for the next generation. We haven't passed any spending bills. And we haven't vetted and voted on President Obama's nominee for the Supreme Court, which we should absolutely do. So when I look at the Senate, it is profoundly different than the Senate I first knew when I was an intern for Senator Hatfield, now exactly 40 years ago. It was the summer of 1976, our bicentennial. And at that time, you had a Senate that operated on simple majority. It was very, very rare to have a supermajority vote. But what has happened over the last 15 to 20 years is the objection has been raised to virtually any simple majority vote. Take, for example, just to get an understanding of this, in 1998, the Senate voted on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, ENDA, and it failed 50-49, no supermajority in 1998. Senator Ted Kennedy, as he was ill, asked me to carry the torch and lead to carry the fight on ENDA. And I worked to get that through committee and onto the floor in 2013. And now we're in floor debate, and I am terrified we're going to lose. And part of the reason I was terrified that we would lose on this important civil rights legislation was because it no longer required 50 votes and a vice president, or 51 votes. It required 60 votes to be able to pass it. And I'm happy to report we did get 60 votes. We did pass it. And that was a tremendous victory, unfortunately one that did not proceed to passage in the House of Representatives. It did, however, succeed in freeing the course for President Obama to do a requirement that all contractors to the United States of America completely end discrimination against our LGBT community. And that was some 25,000 contractors spread all across America. So there was a victory at the end of it, but it shows the difference between the simple majority and the super majority. We need to change how those rules operate. And I've been carrying that fight in the Senate in partnership with Tom Udall of New Mexico. We did have one significant victory in getting rid of the supermajority on most nominations. That is what allowed President Obama to finally put in place the director, Gina McCarthy, the director of the Environmental Protection Agency, Tom Perez, the director of Labor, the Secretary of Labor, to fill those vital 3 seats on the D.C. Circuit Court that were being systematically blocked. So a little bit of progress. But we have to change how the Senate operates. Otherwise, we are continuously choosing the direction to go that most in Senate are saying is the wrong direction to go, and that is a path to dysfunction and a failure to address issues rather than function and a successful effort to address big issues facing America.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that a little bit and try to express another sentiment that I heard. And I think this is really important because you're certainly one of our leading national Democrats and, of course, one of our most famous Oregon Democrats. And what we heard a lot was that in Oregon, while we've really had unified Democratic control for over a decade, at the same time, disparities have actually been growing for people of color, and disparities for really low-income Oregonians have been growing. And so clearly, Democratic control isn't the cure-all locally or even federally. So what else needs to be done to make government more responsive to the needs of the community, and particularly the communities who are growing the fastest and largely are the most dedicated members of the Democratic Party?
Well, your point's well taken. and you think about the fundamentals. Let's start with home ownership. Here in the state, we have a vibrant group of nonprofits that are working to enable folks to buy homes or to be able to rent in a very decent complex, but it just scratches the surface. If you think about the last 20,000 units that were built of housing here in the metro area, I believe the number is that only about 3% of them were affordable to families at 80% of median income. So virtually none are being built at an affordable level. The legislature has responded to have inclusionary zoning. Earlier, when I was back in the legislature, I was pushing for a title registration fee that would enable us to raise money for affordable housing. That did eventually get done. I wasn't there when it got done, but it did get done. But the challenge is much larger than the response. And I think about how what we're seeing right now, where people are staking out 6 feet of sidewalk as their home because there's no affordable place to be, and our shelter system is overwhelmed. This is a symptom of a couple of things. So one is the loss of middle-income living wage jobs. And to raise a very controversial issue, which I'll proceed to raise now, part of it is that we have given our overseas manufacturing competitors a huge advantage by giving them full access to our market, even though they pay far less in wages, have lower environmental standards, far lower enforcement, and when you give those advantages to your competition wins. And we've lost about 5 million manufacturing jobs here in America. And that means not only do those families that lose those jobs, are they directly affected by loss of living wage incomes, but they don't have the money to spend in their communities that drives many other jobs. So we have to look at it as a symptom of our economy, part of the challenges we're facing. And it also means then that the revenues drop that are available to do things such as have smaller class size in our schools, do more with children earlier. We see study after study that says the most cost-effective way to address many challenges is to intervene and support children when they're very small, babies forward, up until they're starting school. Well, how about if we spend a lot less money on prisons and a lot more on our young children?
Just a reminder for those of you listening on OPB, you're listening to the City Club of Portland's Friday Forum. I'm Nichole Maher of Northwest Health Foundation, and I'm joined today by United States Senator Jeff Merkley, speaking to us about working to advance equity and opportunity for all. So I want to follow up on your earlier remarks about education, or your most recent remarks, I should say. The demographics of Oregon have rapidly shifted, and today our K through 12 students, 42% of them are children of color and from immigrant and refugee communities. And frankly, education has not been keeping up with the pace of who our families are and how our classrooms look. And unfortunately today, Oregon has one of the lowest graduation rates in the country. What can you share with us about your role in Congress or a federal role in helping Oregon get better outcomes, not just for children of color, but for all Oregon children?
So I think about this in the context of the neighborhood I live in. It's the David Douglas community on the far east edge of Portland. That David Douglas High School community, when I came there in 3rd grade, and I had reasonable class sizes. There were all the extra activities were free, so I wasn't constrained about the ability to participate by having to go to parents who might not have been able to afford the fee to participate. Summer program had maybe 50 different things you could do in the summer. Again, all of it was free. And then I think about it as my children have gone through the same system. My son, when I walked him to school and for the 1st grade, his 1st grade classroom had 34 children in it, speaking many languages, and I thought, how will the teacher ever undertake this challenge? And the teacher did as marvelous job as I could have ever asked for, but still it's extremely difficult with that many children trying to learn to read in a single classroom. And I think about how the fees that are now in place for participating in extracurricular activities that often keep kids in school, keep them engaged in school, are now a big barrier to blue-collar families. And there's lower participation rates, therefore, and that has an impact. Why is it that our parents did better by us in funding a public school system than we're doing for our children? That's unacceptable. And so we have to keep pushing to change that. It is our future. The future of this nation is our intellectual capital and our physical structure, but our intellectual capital, that's our children. And they are going to succeed and have great lives if we invest in them. And our future society is going to do well if they succeed. So there isn't a magic wand here. The resources are constrained. At the national level, it's under sequestration, which still locks us in for a number of years to come. Under the local level, it's simply the fact the state has to balance its budget and the sources of revenue are constrained. And so we have to do better, but that is the challenge before us. By the way, there was a moment about 8 years ago that we came very close to enabling every child who qualified for Head Start to be able to participate. And since then, we've faded away from that. But let's set that as another goal to get back to, that every single child who qualifies for Head Start should be able to participate.
So it's been an interesting last few months, and over that last few months, we've heard both candidates and some elected officials using really charged language, referring to American children as anchor babies, sometimes criminals, freeloaders, and frankly, a lot worse. Inflaming racist attitudes and distracting from substantive policy issues. What role do you see for yourself as a leader and a representative of Oregon to challenge this rhetoric and set a new conversation?
So I think that we have to recognize that when you have many people who are frustrated, and many Americans are frustrated, it goes back to what I was describing as 9 out of 10 Americans being left out in the cold as the wealth of our nation has increased, that you're going to have potential leaders who pander to that frustration by tearing down others. And they're maybe tearing down immigrants, tearing down women, tearing down Mexicans. Does any of this sound familiar? This is what we've been hearing, and even attacking our children is a problem instead of our most valuable resource. I think when this happens, we have to stand shoulder to shoulder with the groups that are being attacked. So when we hear Muslims being attacked, and we are a nation that embraces the freedom of religion, let's stand shoulder to shoulder with our Muslim community and make sure that no one is profiled and everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive in our nation. And let's stand shoulder to shoulder with all of our children and with our immigrants. All of us, virtually all of us, almost all of us are the children of immigrants. And so it is part of the power of what has made our nation very successful is the gifts and talents brought in from all around the world. And we need to continue to recognize that is a beautiful aspect about America. I think about those words that are engraved in the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. Hope I have this quite right, but give us your tired, your hungry, your struggling masses yearning to breathe free. Let's continue to keep that sentiment in our hearts.
So on that topic of immigration, a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court ended up in a 4-4 deadlock during the review of DAPA and DACA. And for our listeners and audience members who aren't familiar with DAPA and DACA, those are a pair of executive actions from President Obama offering temporary relief to millions of immigrant families and tens of thousands of Oregonians. Their inability to come to a decision meant that this incredibly important decision was made by a lower court in Texas. Now, this case in some ways highlights the weakness of executive order, but it really draws on the question of what are the things that you are currently working on and others are working on for comprehensive immigration reform.
So you're right, it does highlight the challenge of having a court with an even number and a deeply divided court, and the importance of having hearings to vet and vote on the replacement for our missing member after the death of Justice Scalia. When I think about the role of the court, if we turn the clock back to the conversation at the time of the formation of our Constitution, there was a considerable effort to say the check on appointments for the judiciary and for the executive, that the check should be that the legislative body makes the appointments. And then folks said, no, that will result in no accountability, because one legislator will trade off a favor with another legislator and no one will know who to blame, so we'll put it with one person, the president. But in case a president goes off track, you need to have a body that can say that a person is of unfit character. That was a term Hamilton used, unfit character. And so that was the role of the Senate. Our responsibility is to examine a nominee's record and to proceed to determine if they're a fit character or unfit character. It's not unusual to have a vacancy on the Supreme Court. That happens every time a justice retires or a justice dies. But in this case, we have a historical precedent in that instead of proceeding to examine a record and determine if a nominee is of fit or unfit character, we are simply, the Republican majority has chosen not to do their job, not to proceed to carry out their responsibility under the Constitution. It'd be one thing if they vetted the candidate and then voted the candidate down. That has happened many times. The reason we don't see that now is because a number of Republicans have said what a good judge Merrick Garland would be. They voted overwhelmingly for him before, and Senator Hatch said if only President Obama would nominate someone like Merrick Garland, then we'd have someone we could support. And so, therefore, not having a good reason to oppose this nominee, instead they're failing to do their job, and it's really a form of court packing. It needs more attention from the media, that this strategy of packing the court at the lower levels, there have only been 17 judicial nominees on the floor of the Senate and confirmed in the last year and a half, about one per month, and incredible low. And so there's court packing there, trying to wait for a conservative president to put in conservative nominees, and now we see it at the Supreme Court level. This challenges the integrity of our court. Now, back to your point about the immigration. This case is a question of when you have limited resources in the executive branch, to what degree does the executive branch have flexibility to be able to choose which parts of the law to emphasize and enforce. And President Obama has said we are going to spend our resources on those who conduct crimes and returning them to their host country or imprisoning them rather than focus on other pieces because we have limited, so that's the question before the court. The whole thing points to the need for comprehensive immigration reform, and there was comprehensive immigration reform before the Senate. And this is a case where 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans worked together to lay out a vision, and it was a tough debate, but we passed that reform bill. It wasn't probably what any one of us would write, but it addressed the big issues of security at the border, of status at the point of employment, at legal status for those who have been in our country before this bill was passed, so that we end the shadow economy that is so exploitative, that there is a path there to legal status. And that bill went to the House and was never considered. Most people feel, had it been voted on, it would have been passed. And so it is at least a template for which we need to renew the debate. We have had a broken immigration system basically forever. I remember when I was in college in the 70s, we were talking about the broken immigration system. So here we are a generation later, still unable to get a basic bill passed. But I think that would be a very good place to start.
As a Native American, I really agree with you about the broken immigration system. So, switching gears again, also to an issue that's near and dear to my heart, it's become more common knowledge that women are paid on average about 70% of what a man is paid for doing the same work. But what a lot of folks don't realize is that this pay disparity is even wider for women of color, with Black and Asian women paid only 61 cents on the dollar, and Native American women paid 59 cents, and Latinas paid only 55 cents. The disparity is much greater than most of us are aware. What solutions do you see for addressing this persistent pay imbalance for women, and what are some of the other important policies we can pass to support a better quality of life for women, and particularly mothers?
Well, I was pleased that one of the things I was able to help pass back in 2009, the first year I was in the Senate, was the Lilly Ledbetter Act. You had in that act an effort to address a dilemma the court had put forward. They had basically had a ruling that said Lilly Ledbetter, who discovered late in her years of service for a company that she was being paid far less than the men who had the same job, it was essentially the court said, well, you can only sue if you do so shortly after the discrimination starts. Well, she didn't know about it until long after the discrimination started, so it was a catch-22. And we addressed that catch-22. But there also has to be follow-on legislation that enables people to discuss their pay without getting fired, that eliminates hiring contracts that says you cannot discuss your pay with others, so that the information can flow in a way that people could discover discrimination, and then companies will make sure that they don't discriminate in the first place. But let's also realize that a lot of what we have to fight for is equal preparation for the working economy. And take, for example, the cost of college. In Germany, the cost of a year of university is about 4 to 5% of median income. And so about $1 out of every 20 or $1 out of every 25 that a family of median income earns. In America, that's 40 to 50% of median income, or roughly $1 out of every 2. So families can't afford to pay for college. They worry about it their entire lives. They save what they can. They get Pell Grants where they can. They seek scholarships where they can. But they often end up with vast debt with two consequences. Many students never pursue the path believing that the burden of debt will be more detrimental than the value of the education. And many who do pursue it end up with debt that seriously restricts their options as they go forward as a citizen. We have to start thinking of college as an essential part of the education system in America, much as we came to see high school as an essential part of the education system. And that's why I'm delighted to see that highlighted during the presidential campaign with the proposal put forward by one of the nominees, you can imagine which one, that college should be free, tuition should be free for those earning less than $125,000 a year, which is the vast majority of Americans. That challenge of the cost of college has disproportional impact on our community's color, disproportional impact, one of the things that we absolutely can address. Let's make college affordable for every child in America.
So I'm going to ask one last quick question before we go to the audience, and I want to bring up safety and justice. Locally, Portland's police force is under review by the Department of Justice. There was just a national report that came out that said that Oregon has the 7th highest incarceration rate for African Americans. What can we do as a state and as a country to repair the deep distrust between law enforcement and communities of color, and what specifically can we do to better protect Black men from acts of violence from law enforcement?
one of the places we can start with a real emphasis on for training forces to take on profiling. Now, I was reading this book called Just Mercy, and I recommend it to anyone who would like to read a little bit about the death penalty system through the eyes of a lawyer in the Deep South and the battles that he was fighting. He relays that one time he came back to his apartment late at night and was listening to some music that he really liked, so he sat in his car, and the next thing he knew, a SWAT-style team was surrounding his car and confronting him because he'd been reported as a potential criminal. And he explained, I'm in front of my house, this is my house. Well, last Thursday, there was a similar incident here in Oregon where the director, and this is ironic, the director of a play about profiling, the play is called Hands Up, was sitting in front of the Artist Repertory Theater and was profiled, and the lights flashing, confronted because he was sitting in his car. So here we are, there's decades that separate these two events. There's thousands of miles that separate these two events, but this is all too common for our communities of color. So we need training to basically have everyone in the public safety world think every time they interact with someone that they're going to interact with somebody on the same basis regardless of color. And they're going to treat everyone with respect as basically the part of the citizenry that they're working to protect. So training is a good place to start. And one of the bills I mentioned earlier is designed to provide grants for that training. And I think that is a piece of the puzzle. The state legislature has been working on issues that involve things such as how we deal with police cameras, which are also being discussed at the federal act under the Camera Act. We have to keep in mind, as we have this discussion, that the vast bulk of our police officers wake up every day, operate without discrimination, do everything they can for every citizen they encounter, but the training is necessary for the situations where there's someone who doesn't quite wake up with that thought every day. And that would be wonderful in de-emphasizing or reducing the conflict that exists.
So at this point, we're going to open the floor to questions. As a reminder, asking questions is a benefit of City Club membership. If you're not a member, feel free to write a question on an index card, and we will do our best to at least read one question. I will try to ask the question, and right now we can turn it over to our first question of the afternoon.
Hi, my name is Jim Zarin, City Club member. I'm a member of a group of sort of Portland urban professionals, about 20 or 30 of us, Republicans and Democrats, all of the Republicans are the old-fashioned progressive Oregon Republicans. We have dinner every couple months. We had dinner last night. We also had dinner 2 months ago. And 2 months ago, we discussed the presidential race. And 2 months ago, about a quarter of the group thought that Trump might win. And everybody else thought there's no way. And the people who were in the majority thought it's not going to happen. There was a lot of confidence, almost a glibness. We talked about the same thing last night. And there was still about a quarter of the people that thought Trump might win, and 3/4 did not. But the people in the 3/4 group were scared, are scared. So I have a two-part question. It's July 22nd. Who do you think is going to be inaugurated on January 20th? And number two, if it's Donald Trump, what do you see for the future of the federal government?
Thank you, Jim. I believe Hillary Clinton is going to be inaugurated. She's going to be our first woman president of the United States of America. I will add a caveat to that, which is that will only happen if we all pay a lot of attention. Folks have underestimated the appeal of Donald Trump's message of tearing various groups down, underestimated it time and time and time again, feeling like he'd only be in the race for a few weeks, only a month or two, only one more month, maybe one more month, and then of course he's won the nomination, we have to recognize that in an era where people are frustrated by what's gone on in the economy, that it's a very appealing message to blame some subgroup of the country. You can see it all around the world, and you can see nations go way off track. You can see Germany go way off track after World War I. You can see Rwanda go way off track when a tribal president from one of the tribes was assassinated, and so on and so forth. Let's not go way off track in America. Instead of tearing people down, let's build people up and be successful together.
And I would just respectfully remind our question askers to keep it a question, not a statement.
Thank you. Anthony Petchel, City Club member. I'm with Reach Community Development. My question is actually more of hopefully a call to action for all of us. And what can we do as citizens to help support you in your efforts on the policies you outlined and to hopefully support Hillary Clinton or whoever you might want to vote for this fall in this election season?
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you for the great work REACH does. That's one of the community development organizations that has done so much for affordable housing. If we could somehow provide the resources for REACH to amplify its efforts tenfold, we would be doing a lot to attack the challenge of unaffordable housing and homelessness. And so just a thank you to your organization. What can ordinary citizens do? Everything. Everything. Knock on doors, make phone calls, choose to hold conversations in your living room. When you see your elected leaders go off track, let them know. And of course, I know many of you do let me know when I go off track, and I appreciate that dialogue. Attend town hall meetings when legislators hold town hall meetings and give them your feedback and your input, and keep reinforcing the message that we are working towards a path to make America's economy work well, our justice system work well, so that we can take on the substantial issues we face.
I'm going to take the liberty of asking a question from the audience, and this is a question really about, well, I'll just read it. Each time there is a boom or a bust, it seems like taxpayers are bailing out corporations and banks. What more should Congress and the administration do to hold irresponsible and perhaps even sometimes criminal corporation and banks accountable?
Well, we certainly saw such a bailout on a massive scale in 2008. And there's a number of legislative remedies that were undertaken to avoid being in that position again. The heart of it was in the Dodd-Frank bill. One of the things that Dodd-Frank bill did was a provision that I worked to get on the Senate side was to ban predatory mortgages. I had worked to do that at our state legislature, and we'd passed it in the Oregon House, but we didn't get it all the way to the governor's office. And the argument was, well, this shouldn't just be done state by state, those who opposed the bill. It should be done at the national level. And so in Dodd-Frank, we did that. And those predatory mortgages that were then incorporated into securities that were rated AAA and that were insured by American Insurance Group, AIG, so it was very cheap to ensure you actually got the payouts that you wanted, set up the framework for a huge collapse. Well, AIG got bailed out. A number of the big banks got bailed out. So what did we do? Well, one was to pass the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and to have it empowered to end the predatory mortgages. And right now, by the way, they are working to substantially restrict, they don't have all the tools they need, but to substantially restrict payday loans, including taking on the remotely created checks that are the foundation of the internet payday loan industry. And so we need to enhance their powers, strengthen them, protect them, and that was one piece of the puzzle. Another was to have what were referred to as funeral plans, so that when companies were on the verge of bankruptcy, they could be unwound in an orderly fashion and therefore not necessitate a rescue. A third was to have our banks go through stress tests so that they had the resources to respond to conceivable emergencies in the economy. And so the government comes up with many different scenarios and says, will the bank survive, not survive? And our bank capital has improved tremendously as a result. Another was the Volcker rule. And the Volcker rule was part of Dodd-Frank because I had an assistant who came to me and put an article in front of me and said, you Jeff, need to take on the gambling with taxpayer-insured deposits at the big banks that set the stage for a lot of the trouble we had. And I thought, really, me? And not coming from Wall Street, but I put out a memo to my colleagues saying, would anybody like to partner with me on this? And Senator Carl Levin of Michigan came up to me on the floor and said, yes, I'll partner with you. And what the Volcker rule does is says that big banks can no longer run proprietary trading operations that are basically highly leveraged bets on the future price of various things. Things could be the exchange rate of money, or the future price of stocks, or the future value, anyway, so on and so forth. Which is really what are these derivatives. And so ending that betting has happened on a substantial scale. Now, I'd like to say the Volcker rule has worked really well. It has had an impact, and a lot of proprietary trading operations have been shut down. But the rules were very, very slow in coming. They took years to get. And one piece of it, Carl Levin's piece, which said simply that if you are an organization that makes and markets securities, you write the securities, you combine the loans, if you will, into a package and then sell rights to the cash flow. If you do that, you cannot make bets on the future value of the security. Now, that is a very key conflict of interest. It'd be like the common sense, you don't want an electrician wiring your house and making a bet on whether your house will burn down. You don't want your doctor giving you treatment for a disease and making a bet on whether you're going to live or not. I mean, that conflict of interest is destructive. The Securities Exchange Commission has still, now, 6 years later, never written the rule to ban that basic conflict of interest because of the pressure from Wall Street. We need regulators who can stand up to the pressure of Wall Street.
On that note, I would like to thank you on behalf of Oregon for all of your work, and on behalf of City Club for joining us today. And I will turn it over to Courtney, our president, to close out this afternoon.
Thank you all very much for the chance to be with you.
As Nichole noted, we are out of broadcast time for today. If the program inspired you to join City Club, you can do so at the back of the room on your way out. I'm Courtney Nelson, president of City Club. Please join me in thanking our honored guests, our wonderful moderator, as well as Kat Nikolofsky and Colin Jones of the Friday Forum Committee for producing today's program. Thank you. We're adjourned.